Hey guys, welcome back to Into the Mystic. My name's Elena,
My name's Kevin.
and we are here today with...
My name is Brandon Beck, Dr. Beck. You can call me. That's what my students usually call me, so I guess we'll go with that.
full name.
Brandon Beck.
They call you that?
No, you said
Oh,
full name.
okay.
Dr. Beck
Yeah.
is what my students call me.
Okay, I was going to say...
I was
like,
Mr. for a few years. Now I'm Doctor.
Yay! So yeah, we thought it would be super exciting to have you guys, to come on an episode. Kevin and I both had you as our teachers. I'm a junior right now, and I had you when I was in 5th grade, and you too.
I had Sharp and
Really?
Tier. Yeah, I had Sharp and Tier and Vinegar Smith. I was in the other cohort.
I would have
Wait,
remembered.
how'd you know him?
I would have remembered
I
because
thought
we were
you
just
had him.
close. We just knew each other because we were a small
No.
school, right?
Yeah.
That had to be the
Oh.
reason
I was in
why.
the other-
I recognized your face all the time.
Yeah, I was in the other dual language cohort. I had Vinegar Smith and Sharp and Tier.
Okay.
Yeah.
At least you were... No, I knew you were in dual language, but I could have sworn. Okay, whatever. I had you. You were
Yeah.
my teacher. And I remember when I was in your class, I used to sneak food all the time. I had you in the afternoon, and I would, put food in my desk, and every time you, walked around, I would just start eating in your class.
That
I was a
is-
really good student.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's news that I know now, and I will use that to make sure that I don't let that happen again with anybody else. But listen,
Yep.
you're hungry,
Oh.
you got to
Yep.
eat. You got to keep the
Yep.
brain going.
So we have you here today because you are definitely a teacher that sticks out in this district. You're very well known because you have Peaches. You have a dog that goes to class. No other teacher in the district has that. So can you maybe talk us a little bit through what your thought process was with getting a dog? Like, what made you decide that's what you wanted?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got to go back to one day where I read a Time for Kids magazine to my students, and it was about these dogs that were all over the United States that were being put into classrooms. And for whatever reason, on that day, I decided to read it for the lesson that we were doing, just because I knew that students would connect because it was about animals. And I had not anticipated how much they were actually going to connect, because after I read that story, the first thing they asked me was, Dr. Beck, why can't we have a dog? And of course, that question kind of resonated in my brain for a while. And when I went home and read the same story to my own children, they said the same thing. So one thing led to another, and I was just kind of realizing that people were inspired, kids were inspired. They were inspired by the idea of whether it was the dog or whether it was just the idea of something that seemed impossible. And I think that's what was probably the biggest part about it. And it was really a student-led project. Like every single step of the way, I was always incorporating students, whether it was writing emails to principals to get permission or doing research about the benefits behind having dogs in schools, whatever it was. And I think ultimately what it just really came down to in the end was people said yes, and one thing led to another, and I just kept running into people, including like Dr. Sanchez at the time, who just kept saying to me, like, let's do it, let's try it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what was most awesome about it. And at the end of it all, like, here I am now several years later with a dog that's attached to me. Every day I go to school, and it's been just like a really rewarding process because honestly, it works. And, I've seen students who have been, in the principal's office that may be kind of told or may have that perception of like, this kid doesn't want to be in school. And all of a sudden we were reversing the stereotype on that. And these kids were showing up an hour before school starts, being brought in by a cab and holding the door for me as I was arriving. So, that was just a small benefit, but she's a super popular part of my experience. And that's been really, really rewarding. So in a nutshell, that's it all kind of happened one step at a time. But most importantly, like, there's so many people that supported it. And it's just been something that's been really, rewarding as a teacher.
Yeah, so I do remember you reading the article to us, and it was so, honestly, it wasn't hypocritical, but it was like, okay, you're telling us dogs are great, dogs can do all these, amazing things. where's our dog? I was the year that you were just talking to us about it, but like it wasn't implemented. Like not all of the district had been aware of it and passed through with it yet. So
And
I
it took
was
some
like
time.
jealous. Yeah,
It took
I
some
was.
time. Like you were in the class, and I always say that like the first class, the class that really was the one behind pushing it, they were the ones that really didn't get the benefit because she
COVID.
was adopted at 13 weeks and she needed a certain amount of training before she came into the building, and then
Hmm.
COVID happened. So yeah, no, 1,000%. And I do see and run into the people who were in that first class, like yourself, and
Yeah.
they see the impact that she has, and they see that she's coming into school, and it's always so rewarding. But it's also, I do feel bad for that first class because they really did so much work behind the scenes for all the other groups for where we are right now.
Yeah. So that year we had a capstone project, and I remember like half of the class was working with ASPCA because of that. Like I guess you got all of our minds just set into the dog, and everyone just wanted to do their project on like animals like that. But can you tell us a little bit about the training? So you're saying like it was a long process and anything. Was there anything that she like did really well on? Anything she was struggling with that was like difficult to overcome?
Well, it was just a process because she was so young, 13 weeks old. So we needed to wait until she was older for her to really be able to come into a school. But what was really awesome is I had a lot of support from Austining Matters. So I wrote a grant for Austining Matters, and I rewrote the grant, and then they funded it 3 years running, which was awesome because in the grant, it included the training. And so I was able to, as I adopted her, I wanted to make sure that she was trained to be in this setting because I had never had a dog before. And so I didn't really know what I was doing, but I kind of just was really, guided by faith. Like I really believed that this was going to work. Actually, there was never a doubt in my mind that it wasn't going to work. Even though there were doubts along the way from people who were obviously thinking, about the logistics and all the details related to it. And so I got the training to happen. And when I was doing the training with the trainer, I brought my own children who were 5 and 8 at the time. And I wanted I wanted to see my children with the dog, but I also wanted the Peaches to be around children, and I wanted her to always have children around her interacting. And so it was really amazing, and I think when you think about what was challenging, it was just kind of like the unknown was challenging because it was, all right, well, how long am I going to be able to bring her in? Are other teachers going to be accepting of this? Are other teachers going to want to be a part of it? Are students going to be accepting of it? What about allergies? What about, fear of dogs? What about all those things? So we just kind of like one step at a time. I was very lucky. I always had great principals, whether it be, Michelle Greer or whether it be Nicole from, I forget, I'm forgetting her last name right all of a sudden. What is it? Nover. I was going by her. Weirdly, I had her maiden name in my head for some reason. Nicole Nover was essential in the process. And just what was most important was the amount of people that supported it from day one. And so that just kind of gave me hope and promise for it to keep going. So, there were challenges along the way, but I just kept being reminded by like little individual stories and little things that happened that were really inspiring. And so ultimately it led to, I think really great results because what we all feared, honestly, just became opportunities to problem solve and opportunities for us to create positive change.
What would you? Oh, sorry. What would you say your biggest setback with that would be, like with the dog?
Well, it's funny. My biggest setback was probably nothing really related to school. My biggest setback was just kind of like managing having a puppy in the first weeks and being a teacher because I couldn't bring the dog to school. So, I was just kind of like, that was the hardest part because in those first, anybody who's ever had a puppy before, it's just exhausting. It's
like
tiring. I was like, one night I like slept on my living room floor, like next to her crate kind of thing because, you're just dealing with all of the unknowns and all of the things that you're trying to figure out because you want her to be comfortable. But then again, I really didn't really know what to expect, and I didn't really know exactly what I was doing. So that was like the biggest challenge was just pretty much just taking the time that I needed to be able to train her in those first weeks. Like one thing that happened was she ate like 40 grapes out of my kitchen sink, like randomly. And I remember reading somewhere that that was like a really bad thing for dogs. So I ended up going to like an emergency she got her stomach pumped. They had to literally count out the 40 grapes that she ate. And I just thought like, man, this is really a lot harder than I thought it would be. And but we just kept going, and obviously I had a really great vet at the time, and shout out to Paul Kleinbard because he's an amazing vet, and he really hooked me up and helped me out through the process. I just had so many people that were supportive. Like anytime I hit a challenge, there was always someone there to help me out in the next step.
Yeah, that's so interesting because I would never assume that someone who's never had a dog ever in their life would be the person to bring like a dog to school, because I have had 2 puppies in my life, like, and had to deal with that phase where they're like the screaming and crying and neediness and everything. And I couldn't possibly imagine like having to bring that or like train that at that age. Like I wouldn't be able to do that.
From like a class standpoint, I guess, what would you say like the biggest turnaround on your class has been with the dog?
Dude, so many stories, so many great stories. The biggest turnaround would be that I always say this, like people meet at Peaches and they connect, whether it's people from different countries, different languages, or just different backgrounds. We all connect because of pets. And it's really crazy. Like whether you had a pet or you don't have a pet, you still have a story about pets. And I think that's what was most rewarding was the fact that I met so many awesome people that were connecting, even people that weren't even my class, that would come up to me and pet the dog and share with me their dog story. And it was like, oh my God, like this is a place where connections are really happening organically. And I'm not even saying anything. I'm just sitting there with the dog on the leash and I'm just listening and taking it all in. So, and there's just so many stories, like individual stories about students with fear, individual stories of people with anxiety, individual stories of people not wanting to come to school, and just something about the experience. Like it's unique. It's something that they don't see every day. Even when kids come into my class on the first day, they're like, wait, there's a dog in the class? Like they kind of don't believe it until I make them go through the process of going through the approvals. Like every single class, like Peaches isn't there the first day. They have to earn it. And I think that really creates a connection to the whole purpose behind everything.
Yeah, I think there's so many people in our district who are from all around the world, and especially at that age, like being in elementary school, it would definitely be like a huge confusion, of like, what is this? But that connection of everyone like having an experience with pets and being able to connect with her is really important. And I think that's really cool, and it's definitely a good idea. So we will come back after this short little break.
Welcome back from the break. Hope it wasn't too long. We are back with our special guest again. So where we ended off last, we were talking about your new dog that you've been, or not so new dog that you've been teaching with for the past 7 years. And I was just curious to see how
she's helped students with their mental health and that aspect of school, because it can really be an obstacle for people at especially that young of an age when they don't have a lot of resources at home, knowing like, why do I feel so nervous about, this test, and why do I not want to go to school? Things like that.
Yeah. Well, listen, I mean, I think, first of all, we all walk around with anxiety. Every single person walks around with certain levels of anxiety. And, what is anxiety really? It's fear of the unknown. And I think if there's anything that's heightened that more than anything, it's COVID and the pandemic, and having students go from the regular days of school to all of a sudden here we are now locked in our homes for however, and just all the craziness that led to. When you talk about anxiety and you talk about comfort and we talk about those things, like I can't really ask Peaches like how she's done it, but honestly, I think it's really interesting when you have students who like go out of their way to come to my classroom to whether it's pet her or see her or just get excited about it. And I think, when you talk about issues with anxiety and mental health and, the changing times that we're dealing with today that are can kind of be uncertain pretty consistently, I think the one constant in my classroom was that Peaches was there. And I think that constant made something for people to look forward to. And I think that's what's really important. I think as a teacher, you want people to look forward to coming to your class, to
Yeah.
coming to your school. You want them to be able to generate that excitement. You also want to be able to generate opportunities for people to do things that they could or couldn't believe in. And I think it's really interesting because I always say this about Peaches, and we have a before school program that it's like blown up and there's like a crazy long waiting list for it. It's called Kids Helping Pause. It's a really incredible group of individuals. And what I think about when I think about all of the uncertainties and the fears behind it, what I think is most important is Peaches is an energy seeker. And dogs are energy seekers. And if you have a dog or a pet at home, you may have noticed this. And what we talk a lot about when Peaches is in our classroom is we talk about the fact that, well, Peaches can't tell us how she feels. Peaches can't say anything, but
Right.
we as humans can. And what's really important is I get the opportunity to teach a lot about body language, to teach a lot about the nonverbal communication.
Mhm.
And I think that that's a huge part of being able to recognize others' anxieties, the way, someone walks into class, whether they're smiling, whether their head is down, whether their hood is up and they're kind of like trying to bury themselves in the day.
Right.
I think it allows people to understand the anxieties around them in other individuals. I think that's really important because the same way when we look at a dog and we see the tail wagging and we notice that person's happy, it's also important for us to be able to see how other people's are feeling so that we can go up to those people and speak to them and be able to offer support or just be able to offer a high five or a hello or whatever it is, because I think that's such a critical skill to teach at a young age, because it really just all it involves is taking and using your eyes and just being able to observe and be able to understand how do I approach a situation so that I can be a supportive person. And I think that's really what's a huge part of having Peaches in the classroom, and what it's really brought out for me is like being able to help with that anxiety piece and being able to help people manage that.
Yeah, so I heard you mention an organization you were talking about with the long waiting list, Kids Helping Pause.
Yeah.
So what exactly is that? Is that like before school,
Yeah.
after school?
It is a before school program. It started when when I was doing this program and thinking about having Peaches come into school. I went to the principal and I said, I'm thinking of bringing in the dog, and I have this idea, and it's through this organization, and the organization's called Mud Agrees, and they work with all these animal shelters around the world, and they're really focused on reversing the stereotype on purebred dogs. Like most of the supportive comfort animals are purebred dogs,
Yeah.
seeing eye dogs, etc. But, the idea that an animal can be saved and that an animal can have a second chance is really, really what it's about. So what happened was I went to the principal and I said, "Give me the list." And she's like, "What?" I'm like, "Give me the list." I'm like, "Give me the list of the kids who don't want to be here. Give me the list of the kids who are usually in your office or have multiple disciplinary issues or just are
struggling.
struggling." And I said to her, and she's like, "Why?" I'm like, "Well, I want to create a program that is a mentor program around with them coming into school." I said, "I'm going to prove to everybody, and we're going to prove to everybody that not only will these kids not be in your office as much, but they're also going to come to school an hour earlier to the place that people are saying that they don't want to be."
Yeah. willingly like
Right.
excited.
Right. So like and I said it earlier, like when kids were like showing up to school and like opening the door and like getting a cab to be there, it was really like, wow, this is really effective. And it started out as a mentor program, and it started out in that place, and then COVID hit. In fact, I remember I was meeting with students during COVID, like in my backyard on like Zoom and like doing tricks with Peaches in the backyard, because I knew that students still needed to be checked in with. But when we came back from COVID, there was so much popularity around the program that we needed to expand it into something else. And so we decided to change the lens of it a little bit more and just look at it from a leadership perspective. And how can we use this to create leadership opportunities? And there's this whole part in the curriculum that's really about like connecting with animal shelters and really expanding the mission. And so we came up with this group. We called it Kids Helping Paws. And it started in my classroom, and then it morphed into the new morning program. It ended up being like 2 days and 50 plus kids. And, it got a lot. I also have my own life and my own children. I couldn't do 2 days anymore. And I did one. We now have like one day, there's 27 kids. They show up 100% of the time, and they show up early before school. But now what the program does is we have 2 goals, and our mission is to teach kids about the connection between animal and human emotions, and also to help end animal homelessness. And we go to the high school. We've had 5th graders that have spoken at the high school, the middle school, the 4-year-old school, the pre-kindergarten, the kindergarten. And what's been amazing is being able to see how students are motivated by this whole idea of animal homelessness and teaching others. And what it's led to now is such amazing presentations. Like, we don't just go and like do like a PowerPoint presentation and just stand there and talk to you. We actually like, I use a lot of the things that I've learned as a speaker and as an author, and I try to push them on to them as much as I possibly can. And our events are awesome. Like we bring a guitar, we're singing songs.
Yeah.
We have, we're playing catch the chicken with Peaches. We have all these other things that are happening, and it's a really engaging experience. And again, 10 and 11-year-old kids standing on a stage in front of 8th graders, in front of high school students. And it just blows me away because it's really inspired so much leadership, which honestly, when it comes to mental health, when it comes to anxiety, when it comes to those things, like, I'm always looking at it from a leadership angle. Like, how do you believe that you're a leader? Like, everybody in this high school, like, you got to lead yourself out of high school. Like, when time comes to it, you got to lead yourself at the end. When the bell goes off at the end of the day, like, you have to lead yourself to make good decisions when you walk away from school. And so to me, like, that's what the biggest takeaway has been. Like, it's been so awesome to see how like people have just completely gotten so popular to really enjoy this opportunity and be a part of this opportunity, and it just keeps going. And the rest of the school is super supportive.
Just about to ask, what was your like biggest for yourself? Because you've been giving a lot. It seems like you've given these students opportunities on opportunities. You've kind of made your statement to the district, but I wanted to know what you get from it, like, for yourself.
I get the opportunity to bring my dog to school every day, which is an awesome opportunity. It really is. Like, she's my companion. She knows when I'm happy, she knows when I'm sad, and she knows when students need just a pet. And I think that's really wild. And I've honestly seen it multiple times, whether it's a student who was out for a few days because they were sick, or whether there was something that was going on. It's the wildest thing. Like, she picks up on it. I've walked into the classroom after a student was out for a day or two, and I see her like go right up to that student and sit down. Or I've seen like a student who's having a difficult time at home, and without me doing anything, just I walk into the room and Peaches is sitting next to that person. It's just that to me has been the most rewarding thing, to be able to see like how much teaching can actually be done without saying anything.
Yeah, it's really crazy that they can just build that connection with the student without, again, being told, like, Peaches, go over there, like, that it's just instinct.
There's just
them.
an unspoken kind of...
Yeah.
She's a special
vibe.
dog.
Yeah.
She is definitely very special. So I know you've mentioned that you've had your class come here into the middle school and all sorts of those things. What do you think of, maybe possibly having another teacher in another one of the buildings to have something similar? Do you think it would be a good idea? Do you think it should be implemented in other districts a little bit more?
Absolutely. Listen, I highly, highly recommend it. And I've had the opportunity to work and be connected with other people because of this. They've reached out to me, people in other schools in New York and other schools across the country, and also being a part of the Mud Agrees organization. Like, I've even had the opportunity to see dogs in schools in other countries. So it's been completely rewarding because I understand that, yes, there is totally, like, it's business as usual. Like, I think that's most important. It's like, it's not like we're just sitting around in my class for all day long, just petting in Peaches and throwing toys at her. Like, she's totally business as usual, and she's been trained that way. But I think it's just being able to have that effect. Like, even if it's like during dismissal, like, I'll see certain students that go up to her and are sitting with her and are petting with her. And that's just information that's important for me. But also, it just shows me that they're comfortable enough to be able to do that. And I think that's really what it's all about. I think it's really about, like, being able to provide a place where people feel comfortable, where they can connect, and also a place where they can really push themselves to, believe that anything is possible.
Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us. Before we end off, is there anything that you have to say for students our age? A lot of high schoolers and middle schoolers listen to this podcast and they don't have access to a dog like Peaches. They might not have a pet at home. Is there any specific way you think they should reach out to people or start to cope with those feelings that they're having?
Yeah, listen, the most important thing that you can learn from dogs is really being able to read their body language. And so what I'm saying really to the people out there is, look at the body language of others. It sends a message. And also pay attention, because sometimes we send inadvertent messages with our body language. And so I think it's important that we pay attention to that. And I think that everybody knows out there that you are going to experience anxiety. Anxiety is not something that just goes away forever. It's something we experience
Right.
every single day, whether it's, looking in the mirror in the morning at the clothes you're wearing, or whether it's what you're going to eat for lunch. Like, you always have some sort of anxiety. And so I don't think a life without anxiety is something that is really, like, realistic. But I think there are many ways for us to understand how to utilize anxiety for fuel for a fire, whether it be using someone who's doubting you to push yourself further, or whether it means using anxiety to get something done. And being able to be aware of that, but understand that any kind of anxiety that you have, you're not alone. And I think a lot of us walk around thinking that we are the only ones with that level of anxiety. And I want you to know that there are resources. You have an amazing supporting place and a school with a lot of resources that can support you. But the worst thing you can do with anxiety and with your issues is keep them quiet and not have the opportunity to bring them out, or find someone that you can trust to bring them out into a space. Because when you do talk about it, when you do have the opportunity to problem solve, that's the way things work. That's the way you get the opportunity to grow. And I think in order for us to grow, you got to understand that it's not always going to be an easy ride.
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining. We really, really appreciate it. Is there anything else you have to say over here, co-host?
No, not too much. Thank you so much for that. It was very entertaining.
Appreciate you guys. Keep doing the great work you're doing. Keep sharing.
Is there anything you would like to plug before?
Nothing to plug. I just want to plug that everybody continues to push hard, continue to live and go after your dreams, and keep rocking, because you have so many opportunities. And just shout out to OHS Media, because this is an amazing studio and I want one of these in my house.
All right. Thank you. Thank you guys so much for listening. Again, my name is Elena.
And my name is Kevin.
Thank you for listening to O Radio. We put the O in radio. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Have a good one.